NSA Thrive, please help me welcome Miss Allison Tabor.
Hello.
Allison, we've had conversation just before what we're talking about. Your book up here is Work Your Assets Off. All right? Work your assets off. Allison, what's this all about?
Well, I spent a lot of time with entrepreneurs, and oftentimes business owners have this sense of they have to do everything themselves and they just have to keep working harder. The harder they grind, the more success they're going to experience.
Yeah.
So obviously, it's being a little playful with working your assets off because your asset is really your
Sure.
strengths, your, capturing your energy, doing the things that you love and are good at, and not working hard. You don't have to double down and work hard.
And delegate seems to be a top of mind word
That is
nowadays,
a big thing. It's depending on where you are in your journey as a business owner. A lot of business owners, when they hit a certain point, usually like when they're past like 10 million, they start to realize there's no way they can do things on their own. So they start bringing a team, and whether it's a, C-suite or if it's just level, manager level. But when you're a small to early mid-sized business, uh, delegating is not necessarily shared by all.
Sure.
But there's an inflection point when it happens.
Yeah. Allison, this is in any business, whether you're corporate or entrepreneurial, and we'll talk about entrepreneurial too as well, from past experiences, all right, there are adversities, all right, to every business, all right, challenges, choices, and decisions that business owners themselves have to make in
Mhm.
order to get there. Those choices, and challenges, and decisions that are making itself is real hard, all right, especially in today's from an asset value, all right, increasing value proposition. We talked a little bit about your past experience, and I think your experience themselves, what you've done in the past, it really leads, all right, to the direction and dimension itself where entrepreneurs need to head. Tell us a little bit about your experience from the back end.
Mm. I'm
Oh,
just thinking how I could do that
mm.
in short form.
So we'll be
So,
here for the next 2 hours.
yeah, exactly. So I always knew, actually, I was thinking my first experience when I knew I was an entrepreneur was when I was 7, because I was actually playing. I was playing with my sister. We were creating these crafts projects, and I started
Right.
to sell those products. Then I started to enlist other
Entrepreneurialism.
neighbor kids, and the neighbor kids would sell, and they would give them a little piece of that, right?
Oh,
So
look at that.
so
Multi-level marketing
Yes,
on there.
so I chuckled because I was thinking, how far back do we go? Do we go to 7 or do we go to the adults, phase? But
Right.
the sense of essentially, I've always had this sense of being an entrepreneur,
Okay.
and I think being an entrepreneur, especially today,
Yeah.
I think has so much more opportunity, right? Because if you're in corporate, you really are. You might be at the back end of somebody's eraser on a pencil that they're trying to right size, their
Right.
organization. At least when you're an entrepreneur, I find that you get to really be in charge of your own destiny.
Sure.
And it
I
doesn't
agree.
mean it's not going to necessarily always be easy, but it comes with the experience of being an entrepreneur. It's like
Sure.
it's the ride, it's the challenge.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks themselves, sometimes I think, Allison, some individuals are afraid to jump off that cliff. It's not easy. All right.
No.
You've got the leaders and followers and those who just need to get out of the way.
Hmm.
But in this particular fact itself is that in today's business world, with a lot of changes, COVID has changed a lot of things too, as
Sure.
well, in the directions of businesses.
Yes.
Technology is changing. AI is now
Hmm.
developing some
Hmm.
new massive changes out there. How do we
Sure.
adapt?
Oh, it's funny you say, how do we adapt? I think the first thing is just the fact that you
Why do
met.
we adapt?
No, I would see. So that's the key thing is there are people who really embrace, change, and others that
Right.
go, kicking and screaming. So I think the first thing is before we even talk about how to adapt is recognizing the importance of adapting and doing it
Mm,
quickly.
okay.
Because we don't have time to, AI is like taking off like a rocket ship.
Yeah,
So
right.
it's like jump on, grab it, and learn how to leverage it for you and your
Yeah,
organization.
yeah,
It's not something to delegate. You mentioned delegating earlier. There's certain things that we can delegate and other things that aren't a good idea to delegate.
right. Yeah.
And there's also a difference between delegating and abdicating. And there are a lot of people who try to do that.
Right.
Right. So I would say, as far as being, a leader and how to manage this change, is just to know that you don't have to have everything mapped out and be certain. It's just
Right.
go into the direction that your data and your gut both inform you
Right.
to. So do your research,
Yeah.
get as much data as you feel like you need without over analyzing the data, and then move forward using your instincts, your resources, the
Got it.
people you trust around you,
Yeah.
and adapt and go. And it's not like you're following someone else's plans. You might
Yeah.
be creating the plan
Right.
that has not been created for you
Sure.
or before you.
Yeah. Now, I'm the first one to say, so I don't know everything. I said I'm that close from being that far away every
Mm,
day. And I think that the fact itself is that you're hiring to your weakness, okay,
mm,
and building upon the strengths. And that's the entrepreneurial spirit. Whether individuals themselves want to get there or not, or anything else like
yes.
this, it is a challenge without a doubt. Okay. But you've been through some challenges. All right. When climbing a ladder, you've been doing this not since yesterday. All right.
Yes.
But you do it for a period of time. I think your listeners themselves really want to know what you bring to the table.
Mm,
All right. What do you bring to the table from the entrepreneurial spirit, the business minded? All right. And
yeah.
especially those themselves that want to hear and understand or maybe adapt
Mm,
principles
sure.
already of what? Working your
Mhm.
assets off.
Okay. I will tie that to my former career was working in the realm of being a business owner of a small business. It was an engineering business, structural engineering. I was the CEO, I ran the business.
Okay.
And oftentimes I would have conversations with people that they were assuming that my husband was leading the business. And
Yeah.
actually he would rather lead a project
Okay.
and not lead groups of people or lead the direction of the firm. So we were a great complement to each other because it really was that 1 + 1 = 3.
Good.
And where did I think where I first learned the importance of working your assets off is figuring out what were my strengths and what were my challenges. Initially, I would say blind spots, but once I saw them, they're like, they're not blind anymore, but they weren't my strongest side.
Yeah, the scotomas, right? And the
And the
blind
same
spots.
with him. And so I'd say starting with that was recognizing it was early in the business when I started hiring and growing the company,
Good.
and I realized that not everyone wanted to be treated the same, and when everybody communicated the same way, and
Right.
different sets of skills, different sets of motivators, different sets of styles and
Yeah, right.
interacting. And so I realized that there were things that I was really great at, things that I wasn't as good at. So I made sure that I didn't try to be good at everything. I
Yeah.
tried to surround myself with
Well, the
others
good people.
that love doing the things that were draining my energy, or frankly, I just sucked at. It wasn't my thing, you know? So it wasn't like I didn't have that mindset that I had to do it all. I think I did early on, but then I realized that wasn't working. It was
Right.
exhausting.
Sure was.
I was burning out. And so I think on my third iteration of the business, when I really was scaling it, I realized the only way to scale it and still love it
Yeah.
was to not try to do all things and be all
Everything is
things
it'd be
for
all the yeah,
for
exactly. Yeah,
exactly.
I think that's a key piece for today's business entrepreneur, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Alrighty. But now you're working with different types of clients that are undergoing some of the same
Mhm.
challenges that you and I both we went through.
Yes.
Okay. And which is kind of crazy. But the folks themselves that maybe listen to this, they're
Mm.
going to say, okay, all right. I want to know more about the skills. How do you help the clientele, people themselves? What are the plans and policies and procedures and the items of interest, all right, that
Mm.
today's entrepreneurs and today's business people are going to engage with?
Yes. I'd say one of the first, like the most important foundational piece, it's really understanding that we're not all hardwired the same. So it's
Okay,
communication.
good. Love it.
I would start with that. So I'm very passionate around communication. And I've been using this tool that started in my engineering business, and I now use that with every client, whether they're entrepreneur, corporate, leaders on a team. It's using
All
disc
right.
communication.
I love it.
So where we learn, what is your style? How is your style different than my
Personality
style?
styles and how your work ethic is going to be.
Well, it's not necessarily work ethic. It's
Okay.
interesting. So it's not so much a stereotyping tool as it's very nuanced. The tools that are out there, you can learn. Besides, are you an extrovert or are you introvert?
Right.
Are you people oriented? Or are you process oriented?
Okay. Right.
So do you want lots and lots of data, or do you want me to get right to the point with you? And
Right.
then there's a whole other set, which is your motivators. What are your intrinsic motivations?
Right.
So if I'm trying to reward you, for example, with a corner, office with a window, but what you really want is more money in your paycheck,
Right.
then I'm missing it. Or the opposite. Maybe, you really, you're not.
Prestige.
Yeah. So maybe it's,
Uh,
well, it might be fame and more than fortune. Maybe you want a certain title, or,
right.
so it's really getting at the core of not only how do people want to be communicated with,
Okay.
how do they want to be acknowledged and rewarded and motivated. So I think if you're a leader, the most important thing to know, whether you're leading a team of 2 or 200, the most important thing is not everyone on your team is hardwired the same.
Sure.
So you can't like learn a new process or a new tool and try to overlay it in one blanket sweep. I think we're too nuanced. We're complicated creatures, and
We
it's
are, aren't we?
well, it's like, well, if you think, have you ever had a miscommunication with anyone in your life?
Yeah. Well, hello.
And
All
have you
right.
ever thought, like, if you said this, you did this person would react a certain way, and then they don't,
That's right.
right? Because there's a reason. What it is we're treating people the way we want to be treated,
That's right. Exactly.
and that's
Our
not what they want.
mindset. Yeah, exactly.
What do
Mindset's
they
different.
want?
It's funny, Allison. I can't talk about this topic without saying, okay, there's generation issues
Oh,
themselves out
yeah.
there, and
So,
how individuals themselves communicate across the generations
yes,
completely different.
yes.
All right, baby boomers themselves against the gens and XYZs, QRSTUVWXYs, and those folks themselves, they communicate differently. And we're talking about
Mhm.
communication, okay? And so the branch of communication or level, or just the speed of that communication itself, is sometimes altered. Sometimes it's taken in regard. I got to tell you, people themselves just won't hear it. All
Yeah.
righty. And so, how do you feel about the generations, and especially with today's entrepreneurs? Okay,
Mhm.
diving into the technologies,
Mhm.
okay, and seeing all these changes and everything else like us. How do you work with the generations?
It's interesting because I think there are absolute differences between the generation, yes. And within the generational differences, we're still humans that have these subsets of preferences.
Okay.
So I would still roll back to the individual,
Mhm.
because if we say, oh, all millennials are X, or all, well, no, because we have X generation, but
Yeah,
all,
like,
but if we say all millennials prefer this, this, and this, then
right.
we run the risk of stereotyping and putting people into a category.
Sure,
So,
right,
so even like when you think about the disc, yes, there's DISC, and they each stand for something,
right.
but we're not all one. We're a blend of all four.
Sure, we are.
But knowing the percentages of each and the interrelationship between that tells us a lot. So
Yeah,
it's like it's almost like having GPS coordinates and knowing how to communicate with a
sure,
person. So
exactly.
whatever generation they are, it still comes down to how are they different, and what is it that they want, and what do they need. Uh, and not getting too caught up in these categories that people get thrown into, because
Right.
you can make some big missteps by making these assumptions that because they're in that generation that they prefer things a certain way.
Yeah, sure.
So the best rule is like check in,
Yeah,
really.
or check out.
Yeah.
Inspiration, I say, is also bound by experiences, and motivation is bound by mindset. Okay,
Mm,
and those are two things themselves that I've
mm,
always preached out there
yeah.
already, and I think it's extremely important, especially with the viewers, especially with the folks themselves you work with. They want to know what you've done. They want to know the experiences you've gone through.
Hmm.
Okay, and some of the trials and tribulations
Sure.
of this whole idea of
Oh.
business development,
Mm,
leadership, which we touched on,
mm,
and keeping your assets straight. Alrighty, and keeping the mind on the ball, and keeping the mind itself of how you're working to raise the levels of productivity and profitability
mm.
nowadays. And I think those are big keys. All right, and for your audience themselves, is there one thing you want to be able to leave? All right, with your audience themselves, because you're going to be keynoting, and you're going to be getting out breakouts, facilitation pieces, and everything else. They're going to want to know, and they're going to pick every last piece of that brain cell
Yeah. Okay.
that we have gone through out there. What's the last piece or one piece of information that you can leave with your viewers?
Hmm. I'm an and girl, so can I do more than one? Because I like
Sure,
this
you
and
can.
this. Okay, so there's two things. I remember a conversation I had with it was a coach for the Cal rugby team who took their team to succession multiple years in a row,
Okay.
and I loved asking him this question. There's Jack Clark, and I said, I'm curious, what can you tell us about business that we can learn from the success in sports, and you taking this team from success to success years in a row?
Right.
And he said, here's what happens, especially in small businesses. We use this phrase like we're like a family. And he goes, I call BS on that, because you don't want to be a family. He said, families are dysfunctional.
Yes.
He said, what you want is a highly functional team.
Team. All right.
Right. So one of the things that really stuck with me is, what is it that makes a highly functional team?
Yeah.
And of course, understanding your objectives, you're having your vision, mission, objectives,
Got
and,
it.
and all rowing the same place, roles and responsibilities. I mean,
Right.
imagine if, all the players try to cover the same, part of the game, and
Sure.
they're all stumbling all over
They'll be
themselves.
sitting on the bench
Well,
drinking water.
well, but we do this in business, right? You have
Right.
multiple people that are covering the same base, so to speak, right?
Yeah,
Whatever
okay.
the sport. Let's, we'll use a different analogy, like in baseball. If there's a ball that's flying into the outfield and you have, four players with their mitts up in the air, no one knows who's going to catch the
That's right.
ball. So communication,
Communication.
right? So it's the communication, it's the positioning, it's understanding your role within the
Yeah, right.
organization and leveraging to your strengths. If
Yeah.
you have someone who's really amazing at throwing the ball, well, put him in the role to
Put 'em
throw the
to throw the
ball.
ball, right.
Don't say you need to know how to play, you need to throw, and you have to catch, and you have to run. Well, this is what we do in business. Is
Right.
oftentimes we get into this like scarcity mindset
Sure.
where we now need to like, oh, we can't afford to hire 5 new people, so we're going to
Right.
have you
Yeah.
do these 3 roles, and then we get frustrated and disappointed
Yeah.
when people underperform to our expectations.
Right.
So I'd say it's a few things. One, manage your
Got
expectations,
it.
manage your team individually and
Yeah,
collectively,
right, exactly.
right? So you're meeting them where they are, where they want to be, and aligning what they want and where they are to the team's objectives and the organization's objectives.
Sure.
So you have a win-win.
Yeah.
So it's not you win, they lose, or vice versa.
Right.
So it's the collective success
Yeah.
that has this multiplier effect, if you will.
Yeah. Know where your strengths, know where your weaknesses are, and work toward that whole level of communication. So everybody itself is on the same playing field
Yes,
and the same team out there.
exactly.
Allison, oh, thank you very much for coming to the GMS Studios Theater today. All right. How can people get a hold of you? What's the best way that to reach
Well,
you?
the easiest is my first and last name, Allison at Allison Tabor, which is ALLISON at Allison again, TABOR. So Allison at AllisonTabor.com.
Good.
They can visit my website, and
Good.
happy to connect with anyone that would like to talk about leveraging their assets and working their assets off. And
I
thank you.
love it.
What a fun time just to spend here
Thank you
with
very
you.
much, Allison. Thank
Thank
you very
you.
much for
All
joining
right,
us.
thank you.
Guys, another great program here at Thrive Self NSA. Thank you very much, and we shall see you soon. Take
Thank
care.
you.